Joining me now is Sarah Kleiner. She's the federal politics reporter for Center for Public Integrity. Sarah, welcome to the Young Turks.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. You wrote a really great piece called "You Donated to Kids with Cancer. This Vegas telemarketer cashed in." So where shall we start? Let's start with the idea that when you give money to these incredibly important causes, it might not be going to those causes at all. So give us the background and context on that phenomenon overall.
Sure, right. All of us receive phone calls maybe on a daily basis from telemarketers who are asking us for money. And in some cases, or in many cases, as we found, the money is not going exactly where people who donate think it's going. And we were able to show that this has been going on in the charitable world for a very long time. And it's recently actually branched out into the world of political action committees. And these organizations sound like charities, like the Children's Leukemia Support Network, the Firefighters Alliance of America, on and on. And these groups call, ask for money, you send it in, and then it turns out that about 86 cents out of every dollar that you send in is going to a for-profit telemarketing company.
So why are they political action committees?
That's a great question. And some experts say that the reason why some people who have been involved in charitable fundraising are moving into political fundraising is because it's an unregulated world. Or it's a less regulated world. The Federal Election Commission right now is actually at an impasse because it's not able to do its work at this point. It doesn't have a quorum, and it can't process complaints. So we're talking about a world where the Department of Justice has stepped in and is cracking down, but we were able to show that, based on a data analysis, that there were 38 political action committees in the 2015-2016 election cycle that raised most of their money from small dollar donors and then plowed most of that back into fundraising, wages, and administration. That number climbed from 38 to 61 in the last election cycle. The person I focused on in my story, Richard Zeitlin, accounted for about half of that increase in between those two election cycles.
Wow, that's a lot. So does he have a child affected by leukemia? Is he a former firefighter? Is there some reason why he's animated about this and wants to be involved?
So he actually got his start in Milwaukee. He was delivering pizzas as a 16-year-old and delivered pizzas to a telemarketing company. And the man there said, "Hey, do you want to come in and make more money than you can delivering pizzas?" And he said, "Sure." His brother says the rest is history. He built his companies up from there. He moved to Las Vegas with a partner. They started bringing in hundreds of thousands of dollars for charity clients every year. That became millions of dollars, then $10 million. So, out of $153 million raised for charities and political action committees since 2006, his companies have been paid about $133.1 million of that.
Wow. So only did the other 20 million actually go to the charities?
Yes. So the charities got that cut of the rest of the money. And in many cases, we were able to show that the money was spent mostly on salaries and other overhead like rent or lawyer fees or accounting fees, et cetera. So in many cases, even that small margin that actually went to the charity wasn't being used for charitable purposes.
So is it possible that they're just incredibly inefficient managers that, like, God, we raised all this money, but we had to spend a lot more money to raise it, and golly gee, we did the math, and over this huge period of time, we just wound up spending most of it on ourselves?
So you might think that could be the case. In certain cases, there were a handful of charities who contracted with Richard Zeitlin's companies that were shut down by the Federal Trade Commission or various attorneys general across the United States. So in those particular cases, the 4 or 5 that were shut down, regulators came to the conclusion that they were very much aware of how the money was being spent, and they were very much aware of what donors were hearing on the phone from telemarketers that were saying, I'm raising money for this good cause, and then the money wasn't going there. So in certain cases, we know of regulators saying that they were very much aware of what was going on.
So is the charge there that even the charities they give the money to was part of the operation, that it wasn't normal charities that actually care about leukemia and cops and all the other things, but it was folks that also were enriching themselves through the charities that they gave to?
Right. It's a bit of a tiered system, a bit of a network, if you will. There are the donors who send money. They get a phone call from a telemarketer, and that telemarketer is contracting with either a charity or a political committee. It's a third party. And so then a letter gets sent out to the donors, and the donors send in their money, and without realizing it, that a big piece of it is going to the professional fundraiser, and then another piece of it is going to the person who runs the charity or the political action committee. One example of this, for instance, I mentioned the Children's Leukemia Support Network. That's actually based out of Las Vegas, and there are 4 political action committees that are run by the same couple, William Pollack and his wife Keisha Pollack. They run Children's Leukemia Support Network, and then a group for police officers, one for firefighters, and one for people with heart disease. And William Pollack happens to be a Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department officer. He's on patrol duty in the northwest part of the city. And so he's out there enforcing laws, even as we speak, as of today, as far as we know, because the department is investigating the allegations against him, but no action has been taken at this point.
So Sarah, I remember getting a call a number of years back from someone who was raising money for a police charity, and when I didn't know if it was really a police charity, and I've read some of these stories in the past, not one as extensive as yours about this particular situation, and as you point out, it's gotten much worse. But I was not sure, so I said, "Listen, man, this is not how I give. So I appreciate it, but no, right?" And then he started saying like, "Oh, so you don't care about cops?" And I thought that was weirdly threatening, but I had assumed that he actually was a cop. I just didn't know about that particular charity, right? So are you saying that when you get a call from these guys, they might be doing those kind of tactics and they're not remotely cops or firefighters, and they're not really raising money for that anyway?
Right, and government regulators crack down on that sort of thing. If they get their hands on recordings that show that telemarketers are claiming to be police officers when they're not, that's not legal. I think it's important to point out that in the United States, it is actually legal to spend almost all of the money you raise for charitable purposes on fundraising. And same with PACs. It is legal to spend that money on fundraising. What is not legal is lying to donors about how the money is going to be used. So the catch is that regulators have to get a hold of either the recordings or the letters that were sent out to donors that explain or that claim that the money is going to be used doing such and such, and it's actually not. So that's where regulators have to step in and make that determination. Sorry, as you were saying, this problem has gotten worse, and there's clearly a lot of work to do on the part of regulators.
So Sarah, if they actually don't say that, hey, the majority of the money goes to the charity, all this might be legal.
That's correct. If they're very, very careful about how they word their request for money, then it's legal.
And Sarah, how much does this hurt real charities? Because it creates doubt in people like me when somebody calls from a charity.
Right. So the person in charge of policing this sort of thing for the Federal Trade Commission, Lois Greisman, I spoke to her on the phone for my story, and she actually said herself, this is a ripple effect, and it's a huge problem because people who give money are losing out they intended their money to be used for something and they're not getting what they wanted. Then legitimate charities who are actually using money as they say they are going to are not getting the money. So that's another effect. So, right, it is a ripple effect. And she said, if someone calls you out of the blue and asks for money, you've got to do research, just as you would if you were buying a car or buying a new phone. Go online, do some research, go to Charity Navigator, go to Charity Watch, and look to see how these organizations are rated. Now, I will say this. What is interesting is that there are organizations that rate charities, but that's not information that's easy to find for political action committees. So if someone calls you and you ask them, are you a political action committee or are you a charity? And they say they're a PAC, then you've got to go onto the FEC's website or on Open Secrets and do a bunch of research yourself to see how that money's being spent. It's not as easy to determine if someone is using the money as they say they are.
Man, there are things that go bump in the night. All right, and journalism exposes that. So Sarah Kleiner, thank you for joining us. Thank you for doing this story. We appreciate it. And everybody check out publicintegrity.org to see more on this. Thanks, Sarah.
Thanks, Cenk.
On the go? Don't worry, we got you covered. You can still listen to TYT at our new podcast network. Find us on Apple Podcasts, the Google Play Store, or at tyt.com/podcast.